My name's Nathan. I'm an ex-prison officer. I previously worked at a Cat C training prison and a high security prison. Generally is that working in the prison setting, some of these prisoners and some high profile prisoners that I've worked very closely with are very, very intelligent and very, very switched on individuals. Very, very up to speed with topics and conversations that are currently going on. Very show a lot of intellect, high IQ, and like I said, well, sometimes through me early on, as in I think we kind of just assume that they're not switched on and they don't have a high IQ, but that definitely surprised me. Down to even just playing, some of the, chess games that went on the units and stuff like that. And also some of the routines that they have. To us, he was Charlie on the wing. To some people, they know him as Charlie Bronson. Charlie, very old school. He trains out on the yard. That's his thing. He goes out there. The only day off he has is a Sunday. He's out there, rain, sunshine, whatever, all weathers, he's out there. But also, maybe one thing people don't know is that Charlie, he kind of commands that respect from staff with regards to, he would kind of ask you of something, if a case of something as simple as going to collect the papers or something, or asking for mail, whatever it may have been on the unit at the time. And it's a case of Charlie would expect you to come back and just try and remember what he's asked of you. And that was something that was very, I think, important to Charlie. You know what I mean? Just showing him that little bit of respect. Didn't always happen. Units and wings get busy. Things happen. Things get forgotten. But he wouldn't also take too kindly to it. But yeah, it's, like I said, you're working day in, day out with these individuals, and yeah, you get to see a different side to them. Also, I suppose something telling about Charlie would be, he would sing a fish and chip song every Friday at the top of his lungs on the yard. And I must admit, the first time I went in, I was up there working within probably the first week or so. I kind of looked around to other staff, like, what's going on, sort of thing. So interesting, but again, that's his routine, that's him. And that's something that maybe a lot of the Joe public wouldn't know. Each prisoner's different, you know what I mean? Yes, there's sometimes a common theme with some of the crimes, some of them committed, some very barbaric crimes, but they're all kind of their own individuals. I suppose maybe one thing that stands out is we have, there's probably two scenarios I can think of that I think those prisoners at the time who weren't able to deal with some of their flaws and imperfections, down to, I'd probably go as far as to say, feeling quite ashamed, embarrassed, unless you're there in their personal life. I think there's things that they were battling, and that is a consequence of potentially not dealing with those factors that led them on to do some of the horrific things that they did. And that becomes clear, when you're working closely with psychology input and bits and bobs like that. And sometimes you can see, their demeanors and things that can crop up. But that not necessarily for all of them. Like I said, every prisoner's unique. Down to why they've done what they've done and what not. But that was something that was interesting and stood out to me whilst I was in. You use the word authority. I mean, it's, yeah, of course you do. As an officer, you want to command that kind of respect. For me, is like I said, I was in the prison service twice. I had a long stint before going back into the prison service. Some of the things we were taught early on as officers, coming in, was how you lay your stall out the first time you arrive out on the wing, and try not to deter from that. It's talking to people, using your interpersonal skills, And for me, it was just, you've got a job to do, regardless of the fact whether I have um, you know, do I have a way of, or, do I feel a certain way of, what they've done? Yeah, I do. But at the same time, I have to leave that somewhere parked, and I have to put on the uniform, remain professional. And mainly for me, it was just not judging people and judging these individuals. The courts had done that. They'd been judged, they'd been sentenced. This is their foreseeable home for some of them for quite long periods of time. So for me, it was just, right, okay, well, what am I going to get out of it? Because that's not how I'm built. Am I going to make life more challenging, more difficult for these individuals? And that was kind of a theory that I adopted early on. And I'll be honest with you, for most of my career, that kept me in good stead. Just talking to people on the level. There are times when you've got to be assertive. Yeah, there is an element of authority that you've got to demonstrate and show. But I found, like I said, I found the balance. I kept it structured. I never deviated from that. People, I'd like to say that a lot of the prisoners knew what I was about, and kind of trying to find a bit of a moral sort of, starting point with some of them as well. Trying to find something that, you might share, maybe something to do with sport, maybe something was on over the weekend, just something that you can spark a little bit of a conversation, you know what I mean? Just taking a bit of interest. I'm not going to say that's necessarily the way for every other officer that was present on, but for my time in, that's how I conducted myself, and that's kind of what gained me my respect, I would say, whilst I was working as a prison officer. Straight off the bat, it's an occupational hazard. It's the type of job that you're going into, the type of environment that you're working in. We house some of the most, dangerous, very manipulative individuals, in the UK. So it naturally, yes, of course, it will take its toll day in, day out. More so, the unit I pretty much finished off working in is a jail within a jail. So that's where, some of the more sort of, I suppose, dangerous, and depending on their sentence, are housed within that jail. So you're spending a lot of time, day in, day out, with these individuals. A lot of the time, it's manageable, but you do have your days when they are testing you, they're pushing, they're prodding, they're looking for ways into, maybe make you make a mistake, make the wrong decision. So as much as you and I having this conversation, when you're on shift, you are aware of your surroundings the entire shift. You've got to be switched on the entire time. You've got a mixed bag, if structure routines are focused on and implemented, continuously, then it's a universal approach. That's can be frustrating when those, I suppose, procedures break down, and they break down for a number of reasons, depending on staff levels, the type of officers that we've got in and around the jail. That can make a huge difference, and that can do one or two things. It can either make the stress, subside and be manageable, or it ups the ante and stress becomes more challenging. Prisoners are there. Some just want to be, left alone. They want to keep their head down, just get through their sentence. Arguably, not every prisoner works like that. Some of them are there to make life that difficult for you. And when you're in that environment day in, day out, you have to find a way, and it's not always the case, you're able to deal with it. But like I said at the very beginning of the question, it's an occupational hazard. That's what I signed on the dotted line for. That's what I'd taken on that responsibility to do that. And arguably for me, it was just, I try and leave everything at work, go home, you switch off, recuperate a little bit, and then you're back in again the following day. And that's one of the ways that I managed it. And I suppose to the general public as well, it's like, what sense of achievement is there? You're unlocking, you're locking cell doors, and you're going through, a lot of it's the same routine, day in, day out. But I suppose one scenario that springs to mind is, as I mentioned earlier on, the unit that I worked on, known as the CSC Care and Separation Centre. So a lot of the time before prisoners would be sent across to us, there would be potentially sometimes weeks, months of planning, so we would know kind of how they're managing in their current jail, prison, kind of what their behaviours and traits and patterns are, just so that we could then best manage when they arrive with us, to try and keep that sort of continuity. So getting back on track, we had a prisoner come to us, high unlock. So high unlock is it involves quite a large number of officers to unlock one prisoner. That's the level of threat that he can pose and has posed in the past, hence why the unlock is where it is. Also handcuffed as well, so even if it's a case of unlocking this individual to move from point A to point B, which point A to B could be from his cell to the shower or from his cell to the servery to collect his food. The probably rewarding part of when he arrived with us, you're talking of maybe a 6-man unlock, handcuff, to a point where, by touching on it earlier on about trying to find a bit of common ground with these individuals, because you're spending a lot of time with them. It's, as I said, that's their home, their foreseeable home. It's finding a common ground, engaging in conversation, and we as a team, a collective team, we worked together, we spoke about it, and we worked in order to try and get this gentleman's unlocked down, to a point where we were able to unlock with 3 officers, to a point where he no longer needed to be handcuffed and be able to, independently be unlocked from his cell and go from point A to point B. I suppose that's something that sticks in my mind, that, is, as I said, very, very dangerous individual, capable, more than capable. But, when we kind of do things the right way, as I said, sticking to procedures, adhering to what needs to be done, and also, spending time and talking to these, these individuals and finding out, what's your goal? What are you looking for? How come, things were the way they were in the prison you were previously at? And a lot of that could have been based on, they didn't have a good interaction with them. Maybe they, as did things in a slightly different way. And those were important sort of learning curves. And for us, yeah, that's a scenario that sticks out for me. We're human at the end of the day, but a lot of us, myself included, have an old school mentality, and it's a case of, there are times when, things are, are going to take a dip for the worse, and you've got to be able to react in that moment. And in that moment, you try and draw on all your skills and experiences and the things that you've learned. But I think also for me, and I'm a firm believer in it, is when you've tried to establish that rapport early on, those were things that myself was taught when I first came into the prison service, was get to know your prisoner, know what makes them tick, learn everything you possibly can, their routines, so that if they deviate from them, you're in a position that you might be able to, resolve the problem before it escalates into something worse. And on this particular day, alarm bell goes, myself and another colleague arrive to find another prisoner kneeling over top another prisoner, stabbing him, going at him. And in that moment, we're trying to diffuse the situation, and in the same breath, I'm looking down the wing to see another 10 to 12 prisoners tooled up. Now, I don't know which one of them out of the prisoners is his boys, but arguably we're outnumbered in that moment. Yeah, of course, I'm thinking, the worst at that time. In that moment, I played the gamble. I've kind of verbalised to the lads, listen, it's just leave it. We're trying to contain the situation. Boys, just leave it be. On another day, maybe it wouldn't have worked out the way it did. Fortunately, it did. They was able to understand that. They let staff deal with the situation. But, you know, at the opposite end of the spectrum, on another day, that could have ended a lot worse. And you do, I think, you know, you got a height of adrenaline, you know, so some of those things are managed, and you just get through it. When you go home and you rethink and you think about things and contemplate, yeah, maybe it hits home, you know. They may have not listened and understood and taken on board, but they saw me, they kind of thought, okay, we generally know, you know, he conducts himself, doesn't abuse his authority. Let's just leave the staff to manage it and contain the situation, and that's kind of where it resolved. So, but hairy occasions, hairy times. I mean, a lot of stuff I do, you know, in my own time, my private life, do you know what I mean? Training, keeping myself fit, family time, you know, those are things that you can draw on to kind of, you know, try and switch off from work and bits and bobs. Easier said than done. Definitely when you're working with a good team. Yeah, that's key. You don't always get that opportunity, but when you can work with colleagues that, you know, you get on with and you respect one another, you make the shift, you know, your own, and nobody's second guessing. That's definitely helpful, you know, when we're all pulling in the same direction. And that's really good, because you can have, ideally, you know, the shift you're going in, you know who you're working with, so straight away you're kind of upbeat, you're looking forward to a good shift ahead. And also the prisoners like that continuity as well. You know, as much as people want to believe it, but you know, they like structure, they like routine, and they kind of they can adapt and work with certain officers in different ways. Not always in the best way, depending on staffing levels and numbers. And you know, there are times we have detached members of staff to hold a jail up. That's because we haven't got enough of our own staff in the jail or in the prison to conduct the duties that need to be done. And that can send a bit of imbalance amongst prisoners, and a little bit of you know, bit of tension. I'm kind of from an old school era. You know, we had, you know, great leaders, you know, once upon a time. We still do, or still, you know, when I was in. But you know, they set the bar, and we just strived as officers to reach that you know, that mark as well. And it's like I said, it's leading by example. You know, we'd always have new officers coming into the system. You know, and it is, you know, I'll be real, it is somewhat of a different transition coming in now as a prison officer than it was when I first came in. Yeah, you know, I have my thoughts and opinions on that, but arguably those questions can't be answered if you've got new staff or newer staff within the jail setting. You know, you just try and lead them in the right direction, try and show them good habits to adopt whilst, you know, working in these particular environments, because you want to also have a relatively good shift to work on as well. So yeah, you know, that me personally, yeah, you know, if I've got anything that I've picked up over the years and I was able to pass on and share my experiences, you know, I was always happy to do that. It's not always necessarily received in that way, and that's down to the individual. But yeah, as you say, going back to your question, you know, leadership's important. And for a lot of prisoners as well, you know, they like that, you know, they like that they can have a team or a particular group of individuals who can, you know, set the bar, set the tone for the unit, the wing, whatever. And that kind of puts them at ease as well, you know, that things are going to be done the way it should be done, you know. Servery, you know, prisoners' meal times, it's paramount, you know. It has to be done in a certain way, you know. That could be the difference between the whole wing going up or them just, you know, settling down, come out of their door, come out of their cells, you know, and grab their food and back to their cells with no issues. I think, you know, the ratio is we've got generally more prisoners than we do staff. So as much as, yeah, we'd like to say, you know, every staff member gets on, that's not necessarily the case. Let's be real. In any company, organisation, not every member of the team gets on with one another. So for me, and I'd say for a lot of the team, it's making sure that prisoners, you know, can relate, and that is being, being able to be an effective communicator, using your interpersonal skills, and just trying to show that respect, because there are numerous occasions where you need to draw on that, to get a good result, and also go home in one piece. So yeah, definitely. Arguably, let's get straight to the point. I mean, it's resources are dwindling right across the board. So that's what we've got to look at initially. So when you have, say, set programs that are supposed to be conducted and we don't have the resources for whatever reason that may well be, you're then, I suppose, not upholding your obligation to get prisoners through certain programs, so to say. We could talk about the fact where it's potentially more so once a disciplined service to, maybe where, I'll be real, in general, I believe, we're in such an entitled society now. Now, give that persona to individuals who feel that they can, do what they want, conduct themselves in any way that they feel necessary to do to gain an advantage. You're then kind of blurring the line somewhat. You've got a system there to, I'm not going to use the word punish, but it's a case of, if it's there, for instance, the segregation unit, to, instill an element of learning for a prisoner to take stock on their actions of what they may have done on the wing, whether it's, you threatened someone, assaulted another prisoner or member of staff. I've definitely seen a shift over the years with regards to how that was once used to where it is. And we read between the lines on, it's now become a bit more of a safe haven rather than what it was once, or, set out to be, and to be used effectively for. So I think, we've lost, the system's lost itself there a little bit. Is it rehabilitative? Yes and no. I think with staff pressures, as I said earlier, on the lack of resources, staffing levels, it's, it's you in certain prisons, if maybe most of them, you have a role as a personal officer. So you have a particular number of prisoners that you take under your wing. You are supposed to, spend time, touch base with them, find out how they're getting on with any applications, any work programs, whatnot. Those things can be challenging when you're stretched across, a prison setting. So is it a case of, prisoners coming into the jail system, maybe, doing sentences that maybe to the general public are quite lenient, then being in a setting where things aren't, kind of as possibly stern as they should be? No is the answer to, is it rehabilitative? And, does it become a bit of a revolving door? Prisoners coming in through the door, spending a bit of time, back out, back to their old ways. But not for everybody. I had a long span where, you could sit down and engage with certain types of prisoners who could reflect on their crimes and what they had done, and were, what's the word I'm looking for? Remorseful for what they had done, and had made plans to better themselves, whether that be moving away from the towns that they were, and the groups of people that surrounded themselves out. So in that sense, yes, it does, but you've got to look at ratios to the amount of prisoners that are coming through the system, also the amount of prisoners that fall through the net, that potentially prison setting isn't the environment for them. And we can look at hospital settings and whatnot, but then we're slightly going off subject. So yeah, I think it's definitely a different prison setting to what I once started in, to where we are now. Some of the old school values, and kind of which we inherited early on, have kind of been somewhat diluted over the years. I've always worked in environments and in settings where no 2 days are the same. Generally, yes, as I said earlier on, you know what is in store for the day. You have different roles as a prison officer. For argument's sake, if I'm cleaning officer, I know that I'm getting certain cleaners out, certain prisoners out to conduct their cleaning duties on the wing. Down to taking a group of the guys that have been trusted in their positions to go down to the main kitchens, pick up their food, bring it back. To being an effective communicator where you're trusting these guys to fairly distribute the food out to the rest of the wing and not take a little piece, for themselves and whatnot. Okay, little bits do happen, but it's, you do get that enjoyment side of it because you're working closely with these guys day in, day out. And like I said earlier on, for me, that's what I signed on the dotted line for. Let's be real, salary. You're coming in to pick up a check, ain't you? But yeah, for me, that's what I kind of turned back up for. When you're working with good colleagues, working with good, team members, that's kind of what carries you through. You can build some good stories, have some good shifts. For me, it's, some people are comfortable sitting in an office all day long, 9 till 5, not knocking that at all. For me, that's kind of not what I've wanted to do. It's, yes, as you said, I do like the challenge. It does bring some adversity, and you really have to be able to draw on different skill sets within seconds. That's the difference between potentially, walking away and de-escalating the situation and it's resolved really, really well, to it igniting and blowing up in your face, and potentially being, a huge problem. So yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. I always said earlier on, it was just like, if coming into this environment, being a prison officer, it's, you either can or you can't. It's those individuals or that perception of you just sitting on the fence. It's not for everybody. But yeah, definitely.